Thank you, Daniel, and thank you, Jeremy, and thank you, Tyler, for leading us this morning. Appreciate everybody's participation. We have a pretty good crowd here today, about as good as we can get, really. It's very encouraging. Thank you for being here, and thank you also to all those who are joining us online. We're just taking it one day at a time. We're doing the best that we can, and we trust that things will work out one way or the other. But we are encouraged by our faith. As Christians, we have something that we can lean on and put our confidence in that we know will always be there and who will take care of us in the end. And that is our God and the grace and mercy that we have through His Son, Jesus Christ. I want to talk to you for a few moments today about the times that we live in and about preparing for the end of the world. It's a little provocative, but part of my job is to provoke. I think we should, brethren, we need to get ready for the end of the world. I believe that. I think we should prepare for the end of the world. Don't you believe that? Yes, we should prepare for the end of the world. But to talk about that, I want to use a passage in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, which we'll read in a moment. But we are living in troubled times. I don't think there's anybody who can deny that. The pandemic, of course, is very troubling. Our attention has been focused on that for a while now because people are getting sick and people are dying, and that's a terrible thing. We don't want that to happen to anyone. We certainly don't want it to happen to anyone in our community or in our family or in our congregation. We don't want that, and so we're focused on trying to prevent that from happening because it is happening. It's happening in a lot of places to a lot of people, and that's very troubling. And that makes you pause and makes you think about, well, what is happening? What is this leading to? What's coming of the world? And of course, there's strife, and that's been on our minds for the last few days. Rioting and protesting. You can call it protesting, but when things are burning down, it's gone a little bit beyond protesting. It's violence, chaos, civil strife, and that is troubling. I understand what provokes people to do the things that they do, but it's terrible what's happening in our cities. And that makes you think, what is happening? What is this leading to? What's becoming of our world? And of course, the economic situation we find ourselves in because of the pandemic is very troubling, very disconcerting. And you can't but help think about what tomorrow will bring. And there are threats of larger conflict going on in the world. Wars and rumors of wars, as they quote the scriptures. All of these things become, in the minds of some people, indications that maybe the end is near. The end of the world may be upon us. So, should we prepare for the end of the world because of all of these things that are happening in our communities and in our world? Things that some people believe are indications that the end is near. Well, it's a good question. It's the kind of question people should ask themselves. Is the end near? Not necessarily because of what's happening in the economy or in our political world. But to answer this question and to think about how we should think about it, let's look at a passage together in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. Paul writes to Thessalonian brethren in Thessalonica, Those congregations, or that congregation in Thessalonica, had just been established, hadn't been there very long at all. And Paul had worked to establish that congregation, but he got ran out of town. There was some violence involved there. And he got ran out of town before he could really spend much time with those brethren, and so they weren't really well grounded. And so he's very concerned about them. So he writes back to them. Apparently there had been some communication, questions that had come back and forth, and so Paul is addressing some of the issues and matters that had come up, and one of those issues, one of those questions was about the end of the world, the second coming of Christ, and when would it happen, and is it about to happen? And brethren were getting kind of worked up and worried about that, because they were continuing to deal with the violence and the conflict that Paul had to flee from. Paul writes back to them, and in chapter 4, he says, look, this is our confidence. Even those brethren who have passed away, we know when the Lord comes, they'll be raised, and we'll join them. When he comes, we'll join him and them and be with the Lord, and we should comfort each other with these words. But here's the thing about that, about the timing of the coming of the Lord. He says to them in 1 Thessalonians 5 and verse 1, now as to the times and the epochs, brethren, you have no need of anything to be written to you. It's kind of like our saying, it goes without saying. Anytime someone says it goes without saying, they go and say it anyway. Oh, Paul says, well, I don't need to write to you about this, but I'm going to. As to the times and epochs, you already know. I've already told you about this, but I'll tell you again. Verse 2, for you yourselves know full well that the day of the Lord will come. And it will come. The day of the Lord is going to come. The world will end. Just like a thief in the night. That is how the world will come to an end. And we'll say a little bit about that in a moment, about what that means. What Paul's trying to communicate by using those words. While they are saying, verse 3, while they are saying peace and safety, they'll be saying peace and safety. Then destruction will come on them suddenly, like labor pains upon a woman with child, and they will not escape. This is Paul's instruction about the timing of the end of the world, and it's the instruction that we ought to apply as Christians today. We live 2,000 years later, but the instructions are exactly the same. The same instructions that Paul gave the Thessalonians 2,000 years ago is the same ones that he would give us today about thinking about the world. So how should we respond to the times that we are in? Is it the end? Are we near the end? Are the things that are happening in our world signs and indications that the end is near? No. No, they're not. Well, how can I say that? How can I know it's not the end? Well, I don't really know that it's not the end, but I don't know that it is either. My point is that the things that are happening in our world, the disease, the fighting, the strife, those aren't things that God has made to show us or to signal to us that the end is near. That is not what is happening. This is something I've showed you before, but I started preaching somewhere around 1984. Some people think that I didn't really start preaching until later, but I started trying to preach around 1984. And these are all of the years in that period of time that someone has predicted, this is it. This is the end. The end of the world will happen in this year. And of course, all of those years have come and gone. I stopped there in 2016. I'm sure someone has predicted 2017, 2018, 2019. I'm sure they have. I stopped listing them. And you can see why. People who predict the end of the world because they see signs. The only sign in that is that it's a sign that they need to go back and study the Bible. passages like Matthew 24 that talk about signs, if you look at the context, in my humble opinion, Jesus is talking about the destruction of Jerusalem, and he's giving his disciples, to whom he is speaking, a warning about something that will happen in their generation, and that will be the destruction of Jerusalem. They need to get out of town when that happens. But here's a sure sign that people who try to predict the end of the world don't know what they're talking about. There it is. Well, somebody told me I'm supposed to do it like this. There it is. They don't know what they're talking about. And here's my little joke sign, you have to keep updating your the end is near sign. You have to keep updating it because you don't have a clue whether the end is near or not. Now, that doesn't take away from the fact that we need to be prepared for the end of the world. We'll talk about that in a moment. But here's the thing. There's always trouble in the world. That has always been the case. Unfortunately, because men are wicked and selfish and do terrible things to each other. That will always be the case in this world. Police sometimes commit acts of injustice. And people who feel victimized will respond by committing acts of injustice. And there will be diseases, and there will be wars, and it has always been that way. And in this world, it will always be that way. Now, here's a series of plagues that have happened. And I've talked to you about this before. Smallpox back in the 17 and 1800s killed 300 million people. The Spanish flu that took place back in 1918, 1919 killed 50 to 100 million people. The Bubonic Plague wiped out an untold number of millions of people, like a third to half the population of Europe back in the 1300s, 1400s, 1500s. And at that time, lots of people thought, this is it, this is the end of the world. But of course, it just kept going on and on and on, and millions of people died because it was a terrible disease, and it existed before we had antibiotics, and it was awful. But even today, and see, this is the thing, is that we're all kind of basically ignorant, and all we ever do is respond to what's in the news. And the people who make the news are in the business of getting you to watch the news. And so they tell you about the things that are happening now that is new. But there are so many things that are always happening that aren't new, such as malaria killing millions of people every single year. Now, not here, because we have medications that take care of that. In Africa, in poor places in the world, millions of people die every year of malaria. It's terrible. It's awful. It doesn't make the news. And so we have a current disease that so far has killed a lot of people. And every one of those deaths is tragic. And I'm not trying to make light of it, but it is awful. It is concerning and disconcerting. And it is something that we should be concerned about. And of course, it's more news for us because it is affecting our community. But it's not a sign of the end of the world. Just as much as none of these plagues have been a sign of the end of the world. Brethren, the end will come without warning. That's exactly what Paul says. There won't be any telegraphing. The Lord will come just like a thief in the night. And this isn't the only place the Scriptures say this. Why would Paul say that to the Thessalonians? I mean, he could have just said, oh, well, the timing is it won't happen for another 2,000 years. But no, he says, it'll come. Don't know when it'll come, but when it comes, it will come like what? Like a thief in the night. And it's not hard to understand the meaning of the metaphor. You don't know when the thief comes. He comes without warning. Without warning. No warning. Because the thief doesn't text you on your phone and say, I'm coming at 3 a.m. in the morning on Tuesday night. And you text back and say, that doesn't work for me. Can you make it Thursday night? Say, okay, let me check my... Yeah, Thursday night's good. Okay, thanks. Put it on your calendar. Okay, Thursday night, the thief's coming. Text wife, okay, honey, make sure you set the alarm on Thursday evening. And if you could, make sure my shotgun is loaded. And don't feed the dog on Thursday. Well, that little absurdity simply illustrates my point. You don't know when the Lord's going to come. Don't know. And you see, what happens on the judgment day is that you have this. People are saying peace and safety. I mean, if anything, when people are saying, oh, all of these things that are happening, it means the end is near. If anything, that tells me it's not. Because the Lord says, what they'll be saying is peace and safety. And destruction will come upon them suddenly, without warning. See, you know, when you picture judgment, when you picture the judgment scene, and all of these billion people standing before the throne of God, I picture them turning to each other saying, well, I didn't see this coming. I've got to admit, I didn't know. Now, we know it's coming, but we don't know when. So that's why we prepare for it. And that's why you should prepare for it. You should prepare for the end. Yes, when I started my sermon, I said, we need to get ready. We need to prepare for the end of the world, because we do. We all do. Everyone needs to. All the time. Every day, every week, all of the time, because we don't know when the end is going to come. That's why we should prepare for it, because there is going to be a judgment, and we don't know when it's going to be. But here's the point that I want to make, is that the way that we prepare for the end of the world is by not concerning ourselves with when it's going to be. That is not our focus. Our focus is not on trying to line up a sequence of events with certain obscure passages in the Bible so that we can prognosticate and nail down exactly what it's going to be, so that we can say, oh, well, then we need to be ready then. We need to sell our property. We need to run up our credit card bills. We need to, make sure that everything's in order for the end of the world, because this is the date. This is the time. That is not biblical. It's not scriptural. It's not Christianity. You see, Christians don't care when the end of the world is going to be, because it doesn't change their outlook on life and the things that they do and the things they plan for and prepare for and the way they handle themselves and handle their business. It doesn't change anything, because we are the way that we are for reasons other than getting ready just at the right moment for the Lord to come. That makes no sense, because as Paul goes on to say, but you, brethren, are not in darkness, that the day would overtake you like a thief. For you are all sons of light and sons of day. Now, what's Paul talking about? See, the thief He gets the light shined on him unexpectedly. You ever walk in one of these yards, maybe you're visiting a friend or something, you're walking up to their house and it's all dark, and then all of a sudden the sensor comes on, the sensor turns the light on, boom! You're out there in the open. It's a little shocking, a little surprising, and that's exactly what it's supposed to be for the thief. He's supposed to be put off from breaking into your home by the fact that suddenly he's exposed. Well, that isn't how we live our lives. The way we live our lives every day is as sons of light. Now, people sometimes use illustrations. They say, okay, if are you one of these people that, you're driving along and you see a police car, and the first thing you do is you check, make sure, do I have my seatbelt on? And you kind of ease it on over, click it. Or you check your speedometer, slow down. Or are you the kind of person that sees a police car and says, there's a police car? Now, the concept of waiting until you're right before having a wreck to put your seatbelt on is absurd, of course, isn't it? I see the signs that I'm about to be in a wreck. I think I'll put my seatbelt on. Well, that's ridiculous because you don't see the wreck coming and it happens too fast and you don't have time to put your seatbelt on. That's why you wear your seatbelt all of the time. Makes perfect sense, doesn't it? But you see, here's the fallacy when you apply that to the end of the world. You could say, you don't know when the end of the world is going to happen, and so you can't prepare in time. It happens suddenly, so you need to wear your seatbelt all of the time. Well, people say, I think I can see. I think I'll know what's going to happen. I'll get ready for it. Maybe I'll get sick, and then I'll know I'm going to die, and then I'll get ready for judgment. That's just... And that's why people don't wear their seatbelt, because they just don't think that they're going to need it. If they need it, they think that they'll be able. I don't know how to put it except this way. People are dumb. I'm dumb, you're dumb, we're dumb. And so the idea that we just need to be prepared all of the time so that when the Lord comes, we'll be ready because we don't know when he's going to come, it doesn't work all that well. And it's really not even the point. To change the illustration a little bit, when you're driving down the road and you see a child run across the street, do you look to see if there's a police car to decide whether or not you're going to run over that child? Well, no, unless you're a psychopath. You put on the brake because you don't want to run over the child. It's not about getting caught. It's not about whether somebody's watching you or not. It's about being a decent human being and not wanting to kill an innocent child. Brethren, Christians are sons of light. The day will not overtake us like a thief because we're sons of light. Because we're just living our life the way that we want to live our life. Every day, as Paul goes on to say in 5 and 6, 1 Thessalonians 5, we are not of night nor of darkness. So then let us not sleep as others do. Let us be alert and sober. We're living alert and sober lives. We're living lives where we see what's going on in this world. And we know what our part is supposed to be in it. Servants of God, sons of light, people who do good and who commit acts of kindness. And who don't commit acts of injustice, whether we're in authority or not in authority. We're serving our Lord every day because we want serve our Lord every day. And it has nothing to do with when He's coming or when judgment's going to be. For those who sleep, sleep at night, and those who get drunk at night. If you knew for a fact the Lord was going to come, let's say a week from Monday. Week from Monday, Lord's going to come. How would you spend the coming week? How many nightclubs would you go to and drink the night away? How many nights would you spend doing that? Would you read the Bible? Would you pray? Would you talk to your friends and neighbors about Jesus? Or would you go out and commit some felony or crime? Or would you... And what does any of that have to do with whether the Lord's going to come next Monday or not? Let me ask you this. Would you go to church if you knew the following Monday the Lord's going to come? Would you or would you not? Well, what does that have to do with the Lord on Monday? I mean, see, when I say that we need to prepare for the Lord's coming, we need to prepare for the end of the world, there's a little bit of a falsity in that, something that's not quite true. The thing of the matter is that you just need to be a Christian. You just need to live the life of a servant of God every day and not really care about when the Lord's going to come. Since we belong to the day, let us be sober, putting on the breastplate of faith and hope and the helmet of our hope of salvation. Now let me put, it's like putting on the seatbelt. Are you going to wait till the Lord's about to come to put on the breastplate of faith and love and the helmet of your hope of salvation? Because, I really don't want to have the hope of salvation until I really need it. Faith, faith's okay. I don't really need that right now. Or love, okay. Maybe if I'm getting close to the end of my life, maybe I might need a little bit of love. It just doesn't work that way. The kind of armor that Paul's talking about is not something you put on just because you're about to face your Lord in judgment. To really put it on, to be perfectly honest with you, if you don't want to wear it all the time anyway, you're not really wearing it. You cannot put on the hope of salvation at the last minute because you don't really want it. And I'm not saying people can't make deathbed confessions. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that you should want it for your entire life. These things that Paul's talking about, breastplate of faith and love and hope of salvation. 1 Thessalonians 5:9, for God has not appointed us to suffer wrath, but to obtain salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ. That's what we're about. That's what the Lord wants for us. Verse 10, He died for us so that whether we are awake or asleep, we may live together with Him. And that's what it's all about. Jesus died for us so that we could live with Him. I want to start that now. I want to live with the Lord now and tomorrow and the next day. And if I live to be 100 years old, I want to live with the Lord every day of my life. And then when I die, I want to go and live with the Lord forever. It's not something that has anything to do with timing. It has everything to do with what is good and what I want. The Lord died for me. I want to live for Him. Live my whole life for Him. 1 Thessalonians 5:11, therefore encourage and build one another up just as you are already doing. You see, 2,000 years ago, the Thessalonians every day were doing these things. Building each other up. Encouraging each other. Every day. That's what we should do. So, brethren, be prepared for the end. React, but don't overreact to the troubles that we're in. It's perfectly prudent to make preparations for worldly difficulties and challenges. Perfectly appropriate to do what you need to do to deal with the pandemic, to deal with economic difficulties. Live your life in this world because we are in this world. Deal with those things, but don't overreact to them. Don't make them the end all and be all of your life. Don't see them as being somehow the objective of your life to deal with these problems. And certainly don't get your nose bent out of shape because of them. Just become a Christian. Just be. And if you're not a Christian, you are not ready for the end of the world. But you're also not living your life the way that you ought to. A good life. A life of hope and faith and love. Live that life. And you'll be prepared for the end whenever it is. And practice your faith every day. Brethren, practice your faith. Be kind to someone. Go out of your way to be decent. This is how we react to the evil, the troubles, and the injustice and the violence in this world. As Christians, we treat people decently all of the time, every day. And be at peace. Be calm. Because one day the Lord is going to come for you at the end of your life, or for all of us at the end of this world. And as Christians, that will be a glorious day. That will be a victorious day. That will be a wonderful day. Come, Lord Jesus, come, is how the Bible ends. Be at peace. Doesn't matter if the world's going to end or what happens in the interim. Be at peace. And comfort and encourage each other. Comfort and encourage your family. Comfort and encourage your brethren. Comfort and encourage your friends and neighbors. Show them the life of somebody who lives every day for the Lord and who's ready for His coming. And who's ready for what comes, what may. He's ready. Live your life. Be prepared. That's my message for you. If you're not a Christian, let us know that you want to become one. Give yourself to the Lord in baptism and share that life with Him every day. And live a life of joy and peace and comfort in this troubled world. Let us know if you need to do that. Come forward and say,